Hi guys. Can everyone hear me? Can I get a thumbs up? I've got new earphones in. Hello? Can anyone hear me? Yeah, perfect. Awesome, awesome, awesome. This is the first space of UFO Twitter Week. Really excited. So we'll get moving once Dr. Dan has entered the space. But hi, I see you. Hi Mello, hi Nora, hi everybody else. And of course, my dog's now barking in the background, naturally. Mella, you've got a space in a few hours, right? Looking forward to that one with Chris Bledsoe. It's going to be a good one. I think it's about 2 a.m. my time, or maybe 12. So yeah, I'll try and stay up. Hey, Jared. I think this is Dr. Dan's first ever X space, which will be pretty cool. So we'll just wait for him to get in the space. But yeah, I feel like I haven't done a space in so long. But we're doing, I think I've got maybe 5 this week. So tomorrow I have Steve Merra. Wednesday we're with Darren King. Thursday we have Dr. Mike Masters. Friday we have, who do we have Friday? Matthew Pines. On Saturday I have a mystery guest. Dun dun dun. And we also have Matt Ford, Sean Cahill, and potentially someone from Brazil. Let me just see where Dr. Dan is. Dun 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 dun. We are live. Hi, Fringe. It's good to see you. I hope you're well. Just waiting for Dan to drop into the space and then we'll get going. It feels really quiet. Here's Dan now. Hi, Dan. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
I can.
Wonderful.
This is I was just saying to some of the listeners, I haven't done a space in quite some time. So just dusting off my spaceness and we'll get into it. But yeah, firstly, is this your first X Space, Dan?
Is this my first like being on a space?
Yeah, well, speaking on a space, yeah.
Speaking, yes, it is my first speaking. I've never co-hosted a space. Yeah, I've just actually started joining them as a listener, and then occasional speaker. But very infrequent. So this is all new.
Well, welcome.
Thank
My
you.
spaces are normally great. We have a chat, sometimes there's some questions, and you have the honor of being the first space for UFO Twitter Week. Dun dun dun. I also make my own sound effects as well. Like it's quite annoying.
That's why I'm here, for the sound effects.
Imagine it was just a space full of sound effects. But it's 2 minutes past the hour, so the space has gone out. Guys and girls, beings, feel free to retweet it out. It'd be great to get some more listeners into the first space of your Photo Week. But I like the sound of my voice a little bit too much sometimes. So let's dive into it. It would be really great to just get a little bit of background about who you are, what you do, because I wouldn't want to butcher your profession and your education.
Mhm.
But I will out you for being a Brit because I always need a fellow Brit in a space. So me and Dan are British.
Yep. Yeah, and so my name's Dan. I am originally from England, as Holly said. Was born in London, grew up right in the city there, and then when I was about 8, I moved to the West Country, as we call it, which is Gloucestershire, kind of near Bristol, Cotswolds, beautiful area, and always loved. And I always sort of say this when I'm sort of describing myself because I remember it so vividly. I just always loved American TV shows, and America just seemed this very exciting place. And I'd been maybe once. I think I visited LA and Boston when when I was a younger kid. But and I remember having a great time. So I always wanted to move to America, and had that intention for as young as 8, and finally made it at 14. I applied to a school out there on my own, and was a boarding school, and I was fortunate to get a scholarship, and yeah, went to a boarding school in California near Santa Barbara. Um, and after there, I moved back to the UK for a bit, and then this is part of my personal journey, but I had a lot of very severe anxiety, which inspired my becoming getting a degree in psychology and getting a PhD and becoming a mental health practitioner who specializes in anxiety disorders, which for anyone who may not be familiar also includes things like OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder, trauma, in addition to sort of social anxiety and panic disorder and all that good stuff. So I'm an expert at treating those. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I have a master's degree in um, child psychology, a master's degree in another one in cognitive science, and a PhD in counseling and clinical psychology. Um, I wrote my dissertation on social anxiety and perfectionism, which was really just kind of a kind of a big topic that hadn't come out yet, but really linking how we set our expectations and how expectations play a role in anxiety and the onset of anxiety and how we interpret threat and uncertainty and how we handle that. So that was sort of my contribution to the field at that time. And my career has been basically helping people with really severe anxiety. So, symptoms of anxiety, a lot of fears, a lot of escape and avoidance. I work on the more high end of acuity, which basically means more severe cases. I have had a private practice, but I've mostly own or run programs where there's people actually coming intensely every day, or a residential program. But I also have a small caseload where I'm coaching clients through that. Now, I haven't mentioned anything about the phenomena in that introduction, but I have been interested in the phenomenon since my own experience in 2015.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, it was a very, very sort of big, powerful experience, and didn't mention anything about it until I discovered at least the New York Times article. I guess it came out in 2017, but I didn't hear about it till 2018. And then I saw James Fox's documentary, The Phenomenon, or
Yeah,
Phenomenon, which
powerful
was
film.
unbelievable. Yeah, I've seen it 5 times. And yeah, you put that together, and then Lou Elizondo did this great talk at it's like the GQ talk
Yes,
in the UK. Yeah, you'll know that one, Holly. So there's 4 or 5 things that kind of happened, and then you're hearing more stories, and then I
for
joined
sure.
X, and
And
then
here
it's
you
like,
are.
and here I am. I felt safe, right? To like I'm gonna share my personal experience a little more safely, despite being in a world that is not probably very agreeable to any of this.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's interesting that, how people from all walks of life and all professions and occupations, when they have had an experience, they need to find a safe space to kind of explore it a little bit. And it's we're seeing a lot of new people coming into the topic and finding it through X, which this is why spaces like this and weeks like UFO Twitter Week are important, because it gives people the chance to learn, it gives people the chance to speak to people like yourselves, but it also enables us to unpack it a little bit. So, just shifting gear slightly, you're a professional who deals with anxiety and all that is within that. Me, I've talked about my story quite openly. I'm an experiencer. There's many people in this room. I see our experiences, and sometimes it being an experience, it can be so anxiety ridden because you don't know where to turn. You don't know what to do with that experience. You don't know how to deal with that anxiety. And I wonder, as a professional who treats people with anxiety and someone's experiencing it themselves, how do you marry those two? Gosh,
Hmm.
that was a deep question to get us going, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
Bam.
Um, so um, I mean, there's lots of types of experiences, right? I mean, everything from I think I saw a light and it moved in this, or I saw a light in the sky and it moved oddly, and look, is that a UFO or, okay, so everything's unidentified until it's not, but you know what I mean? Is that something out of this world? And to everything from I had this more engaged interaction with the phenomenon to I've been abducted or I've had time dilation, or there's lots of it's a sort of a
Yeah,
spectrum of experience, and so how you approach or respond to where someone is on that spectrum of that experience is going to obviously vary. But there's some underlying themes, I think, or approaches, and they include being, radically empathetic, authentic, genuine, as best you can. Always seek to believe the person, and there's a debate, I guess, in the field of psychology, somewhat with that statement, by some more sort of more on the psychiatric end, right, where hey, if you're hearing someone say that they've been abducted by aliens, you should, try to get them to hospital, or you should or encourage them to consider that's irrational, and that's not how I work, and how most therapists really should work, because unless someone's having active hallucinations and delusions, which are very different, by the way, than reporting that something significant you've had an encounter, let's say.
yeah,
There's visual hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, where I'm hearing voices and I'm seeing things, and that's usually an active, ongoing thing. It's not like typically an encounter. I'm not a sleep paralysis expert, but that there is some overlap there. But generally, you want to be a good listener, and you want to believe that person, explore their experience with them as much as they are able to and ready for. So really kind of meeting them where they're at in that experience that is going to create some anxiety, and understanding what their fears are. Is it fear of ridicule, judgment? Is it fear of it happening again, or a fear of, did I really see that? So really trying to have a full understanding of their experiences is critical.
absolutely. And I encounter lots of different experiences here in the UK, certainly, that as you put it so eloquently, it is a spectrum from seeing lights to full blown abduction experiences. And I know there's people in the room who have experienced all parts of those elements, if that's the right way to phrase it. Do you think now that there's more active, let me rephrase, here on UFOX, we're constantly talking about the phenomena in all its guises, all of its colours, all of its ways, from it being a pleasurable experience to it being a really hellish experience in some people's lives. It completely and utterly turns their lives upside down. But stepping out of a safe arena where we're talking about it, how do you think conversations in the more mainstream environment happen for experiences? Because they're literally, I know of very few places in which people where people can turn to. And how do we start having those conversations in more mainstream ways, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, and I was talking about this the other day, where I was thinking about the percentage of people that I know, either in the US, the UK, that have any semblance of knowledge, understanding of the phenomenon, what we all are very familiar with. And it's like, for me, it's like less than 5%. which is not ideal because I don't have a lot of people to talk to, which is probably why I'm on X and connecting with folks on other platforms as well. But I think yeah, it's depending on where you are, and there's such a cultural component as well. But and I'm sorry, I'm getting a little. What was your specific question again? I apologize.
I think it was I was trying so my point is we can talk about it in these environments, but now there's a lot more media interest, there's a lot more stuff happening. Certainly since Lou's book
Mm,
came out, we've seen him on various programs here, there, and everywhere. And there's got to be experiences of the phenomena out there in a mainstream environment, like trying to talk about it. I think maybe we've just hit on upon a discussion point more, but I think the point I'm trying to get at is how do we as people talk about it in more mainstream ways? Because
Oh, I see. Yeah,
we're kind of
absolutely.
like insular as a community, aren't we? And I am starting to see it spill out. But as this spills out into mainstream environments, that's going to cause anxiety. Like for example, my friend, she thinks I'm cuckoo. She doesn't understand any of it, but she's seen more recent things in our press here in the UK, and she's like, "There's aliens. Does that mean my kids are going to get taken? What does that mean for me? Oh my God."
Mm.
And I'm sensing there can be a kind of anxiety coming from the mainstream. And I wonder how we deal with that, how we have those conversations.
Okay, yeah, no, and that's a really good topic to think about and discuss. I mean, I am more cautious with how I bring it up, and it really depends. And you should be sensitive and aware of how it may come across, because we don't want it to impact your life and your work and your social relationships, and we also want to get it out there. So I think it's reasonable to not maybe jump into interpreting what it is, and not everyone does that. But none of us really know what it is. We've just had experiences. I think a safe bet is really just communicate what you can factually sort of what factually happened, what you saw, what you experienced. It's okay, the psychological experience, how it felt. That's I don't think that should be judged by other people, because you're not saying, oh, I saw an alien, and or I saw something in the sky and it is NHI and it's technology and the government is aware of it, or and they're hiding it. You're not jumping to nine things that could be viewed as conspiracy theories, and maybe most of them, some of them are, not sure, right? But just it's like introducing any topic that you're passionate about, and someone else might be fearful or not have any knowledge. You want to do it gradually and slowly, and it's sort of like gradual exposure. This is how we
Yeah,
treat anxiety and fear. It's like you first think about the thing that fear and induces anxiety, and then you face it. And so, just like if you're, I don't know, a strong Christian, let's say, and you're talking to an atheist, you're not going to, take him to maybe an evangelical church,
true.
in some part of America. You might just gently talk about the meaning it's brought to your life and how it's good for you, and you're not trying to convince
Yeah.
anyone else of anything else. So, that would be my point, but I'd love to get your thought on that.
See, I bat between the soft, gentle approach to also then ripping the band-aid off, because they're kind of, for us, the toothpaste out the tube, right? But that's us, that's people that are in experiences, that's people within the community who are talking about it day in and day out. So I kind of I bat between the two. What I do know is we need to have kinder discussions around this, and we need to create kinder spaces for more mainstream. But something that I've been toying with, and I would like maybe to get your thoughts on, as kind of more countries across the world openly begin to investigate this phenomena a bit more, China, Russia, other places have got programs. How do you think like cultural backgrounds influence the way people might respond psychologically to disclosure?
Mhm.
Because I think our cultural backgrounds really might feed into how we respond, right?
I mean, absolutely. And I think if you look at mental health as an example of that. So growing up in England, if you had depression, at least in the community that I grew up in England, it was, well, just cheer up, hey, you got this going for you, you'll be fine. Or if you have anxiety, oh, calm down, you don't have to worry about that, snap out of it. Of course, what I would like to say to that is, if I could, I fucking would. I'm not stupid, right? No one chooses
Right.
to be
Absolutely.
anxious or depressed or, clinically. I mean, sure, we all get sad and down and anxious, but having a depressive disorder and anxiety disorder is totally different than anxiety and depression. I just want to get that out there because that's so important. But similarly to that, there is absolutely a cultural phenomenon, in and of acceptability. Let's say there's some countries that I think are more open to spirituality. Still are grounded or connected in science, but they just have a more holistic sort of worldview, and more open-minded, with sort of non-traditional methods and philosophies. And I don't know where America sort of compares to others. I'd say America is probably, I don't know, maybe more open and accepting
Yeah,
than some countries. Um,
I
how
find
would you
that
compare the
too.
UK and the US?
Well, that was going to be my next question. So my family are all from Ireland and Wales, and my nan, my mama, she was a very traditional Irish Catholic, very religious, wouldn't believe in certain phenomena, but the Southern Irish thing where she would leave, silver out for the fae very normally. But, so I have that in my background, but I find, and that's probably why a lot of my friends are American. I'm in this space with a lot of my American friends and colleagues. I find America a lot more open than the UK. And I think the UK, we do have a thriving community here, but there's that stiff British of, oh, don't talk about it. Oh, don't just get
Yeah,
on with it,
absolutely.
and it's still in shadows, and some of my work is certainly highlighting the fact that we don't need to talk in shadowy corners anymore, and we can be open about it. So yeah, that's an interesting one. So maybe, yeah, America is a little bit more open.
Yeah, I think something to
Mm.
be aware of as well, and we all know this, but any interest, any movement has fringes. It is a spectrum, of experience, a spectrum of belief too. I mean, my degree of belief in the phenomenon has waxed and waned and changed, and I'm changing it based on data. I mean, I am a rationally grounded person, as I think all of us are at some level, and some maybe too much and not enough, but it is based on new data. And there were some big encounters that were, I hate the word, but debunked, or they were proved to not be what we thought they were. Now, there's a cognitive bias to assume, well, if that video was debunked, then all the others must be debunkable. So one's got to be aware of your biases in that direction as well as in the other direction. But I think it's, yeah, it's just being aware of that spectrum, and being open to kind of moving along it and being sensitive to someone else not being maybe where you're at. I mean, like, I think people like Mick West, they're only one encounter away from being on this group. Like, Mick West would be here if he had an encounter,
Imagine.
and I wouldn't be anywhere close to being on this space if I hadn't had mine. Yeah, I was always interested in the psychology of belief and faith, and how fear plays a role in the need to connect and believe in something beyond ourselves. And did those things play a role in the phenomenon and what we're all experiencing? Absolutely. It's not the reason for it, but there's just so much data now, or data, um, to
Don't you
support
get
the
too American on me. Data.
or data, I think they say in Australia, I
Data.
can't even remember, um, to suggest that, or to support that the phenomenon is real, whatever it is. And it's a cliched line now, but it's very good. Is that, disclosure is not an event; it's a process. And I think it can be a process for each of us. It's an individual journey that we have to respect, that we're all on at different places, stages. From, I haven't even started on my journey till I'm at the other end, and maybe realizing there is no end. It's an ongoing process of discovery, both self-discovery and then discovery of the world around us and beyond,
For sure.
and being open to just working within that continuum in a very kind, warm, sensitive, non-judgmental space.
And I think that's so beautiful if we as a community and as a people can get to that space, but to be human sometimes doesn't always get us into those kind of spaces. But I believe that we can if we work together through this. But I'm a bit, I'm a bit love and light and a little bit warm. I think, there's a lot of efforts happening at the moment behind the door, behind the scenes, or whatever we're calling it, to to declassify some of this phenomena as much as possible. How might the shift from secrecy, from everything being so secret, to being more transparent? How do you think that will affect people who are prone to anxiety? So things are coming
Hmm.
out of the shadow and into the light a bit more. But what would be the effect and effect to those who are prone to having, is it an anxious mind or an anxious disposition? I don't know the right terminology. Sorry, doctor.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And I just want to preface that anything I say, these are just my personal opinions. I'm not speaking from a place of practitioner. While I do work with individuals with anxiety, I'm not here to, this is not mental health support, but just my own personal opinion and insight. My opinion is that catastrophic disclosure is something that could and potentially would happen if disclosure isn't done right or gradual. Many people will disagree with me. I think, I mean, even for me, and I'm not basing my opinion based on just my experience at all, but my experience was there was ontological shock. I was a practicing kind of Christian. I would go to church. It sort of became a Christian in the sort of evangelical sense. Not more conservative evangelical sense, but in 2010. And trust me, it was really hard to like believe, and that's maybe my own limitation, right? Because why can't these two things coexist? Catholic Church have been open probably to that for years or centuries. But I think I think it could be catastrophic. I mean, whatever it is 45% of America at least are identify as Christian or attend church, and they aren't speaking of other civilizations on other planets, or fifth, 10th dimension, or interdimensional travel, or they're not. How would that be integrated? Now, one could say, okay, it's part of our species to evolve to changes, right? And we would find a way to integrate this new reality into our faith, or into the faith that a lot of people have. Maybe we would just get up and all just go to work and just be fine with this new knowledge. But I don't think so. And I think the government knows that.
Mm,
And I think that is why, they are about controlling and managing the masses and the population, which is us. And I think sometimes it's to protect what shit, there's something in the sky, we don't know what it is, and we probably feel like we should, and we don't want people to freak out. So we're going to say it's one thing when it's another, or allow people to say it's a UFO when it's not, or um, whatever it might be. But my belief is, yes, there is a lot of information that they have not shared and are not going to share, and I wish they would. I think we've got to protect the the methods that we take these videos or
yeah,
photographs, and all that. I think that's a load of bollocks, a lot of it. There's ways to
that
redact,
was
or
so British bollocks, by
oh,
the
I had to throw it in
way.
there, once, for you. But I mean, come on, I mean, like, if what the release of those three Navy videos, how has that impacted our national security? Not at all. And they would never have been released unless, I forget, who was, actually, who actually released them, but it has an effect. And there's lots, I want to see that video of that's, as good as it gets, as Lou said. And there's going to be some others. We need that information so we can all make a data informed decision about what it is, and if they actually know, yes, it should be their responsibility to share it. I want to be open-minded, as I'm sure everyone does, of whatever it is, we should have a right to know.
Absolutely, and there's people in this room that I know really pushed very hard to have that advocacy that we should know. We are ready as a people. I was in an event about a year and a half ago, and I took someone very close to me, and it was a contact experience, and complete skeptic, thinks I'm a bit crackers, and just was like humored me. And they had an experience, and I was waiting for them to have this big, oh my goodness, my worldview has shifted. Like, oh my goodness, like I'm gonna sell the house and I'm gonna go and like investigate this. And
Yeah,
literally within 10 minutes, this person was like, should we have a cup of tea and go and get a bag of chips?
yeah,
And I was like, What? You've been so skeptical to this entire thing, yet now you've seen something we can't explain, and you're like, cool with it." And it just that experience stuck with me more than them having the experience of seeing something. And my opinion, I think we're ready, but it's how it comes out. And I will always be an advocate for creating kinds of conversations around these things. Now,
well, what you're
we talk
speaking to is very interesting, because you're speaking
You
to the
think?
fear on both ends of this whole thing, because there's a fear of, what if it doesn't exist, right? What if there is no phenomenon, it's just us, or there's other civilizations out there in the universe, but of course they haven't traveled, or and there's fear with that, but then there's also a fear of believing. So there's comfort that's found through this, but then for some people, it's like it would induce too much anxiety and fear to even delve into that and accept, well, I just saw something pretty phenomenal. It could represent the phenomenon that my friend Holly's really interested in and believes in. So there's fear of belief, and there's fear of non-belief.
Wow, I like that. I feel like I need to take notes. I'm like scrambling to write that down. That's quite powerful. Now, you mentioned something just a little further but back in the conversation about understanding of like the reality. Um, there's a lot of discussions, there's lots of documentaries and films coming out, and it's something me and you sort of touched on privately. We know James's film's coming out the program. Dun dun dun, and it's great. How do you think people will sort of reconcile the psychological challenges of confronting the phenomena that might fundamentally alter their reality? Like, how do we address that psychological challenge? At that moment, they might sit and watch this film, for example, and they're like, okay, there's some real credible people. You and I both know who's in the film. There's some real
Yep.
credible people. And I know if I stick my, Jewish grandmother who really like doesn't want to, she's just in her world. She's 80 years old. She's set in her ways. I come from a family that's had a very military family as well. And so me saying I've seen something in the sky, she's not that interested. But if I tell her this general who served in the forces for 50 years, and I'm not saying it's a general before anyone clips me, I'm just surmising my experience here. If I put her in front of something that shows really credible people, she's going to be challenged. And how do you think a film like, a lot of these things that are coming out have credible people in? How do you think that affects people when there's credibility to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it affects people significantly. I think if you look at the percentage of people that believed in the phenomenon, that I'm just going to refer to the whole thing as the phenomenon, but in 2000, I think it was 2021, I believe it was 67, 63%. Prior to 2017, 18, it was around 30%. Because what did we see? We saw the New York Times, we saw Senator Harry Reid. We saw credible people, right? The guy who was at the Salt conference, and I'm just, I'm not going to, you know the names, right? So it absolutely does help in, but it also, the psychology of it too is nothing's going to really make me believe it till I see something or experience it myself. Some people say, well, even if the president comes out and says it is true, there'll be a percentage of this country that still won't believe it. Maybe 20% will say, yeah, whatever.
Hmm.
I live in my world. I believe what I believe in. Unless I experience it, it's not real. But I would say the majority, yeah, they want universities to acknowledge it. They want to see the peer-reviewed journals.
Yeah,
They want non-profit companies or organizations speaking of it, for-profit, NASA, CIA, FBI, like everything under the sun to basically all kind of agree, which, I don't foresee happening. But I don't know if I could add anything to that other than I think we all need different things. But yes, it will help. These documentaries do help, especially when there's credible people on there. Now, credible people can make mistakes. Credible people can, um, there's a lot of talk about whether credible observer or an expert observer. There's no training course or degree, I don't think, in being, a credible UAP observer. Everyone is fallible, and we make mistakes, and we think it's one thing, and it's something else. That being said, I think, if speaking of the program and the few parts of it I saw, I think it's going to have a big impact. I think it's a phenomenally made film. But
yeah,
I'm very excited about it, and it's going to be a part of, I think, the data that's going to support everyone's data-based or data-driven decision making. That's my hope, right? Because
hmm,
people are making data-based decisions. Everyone in this community is making decisions based on data. It's just data for one person is sufficient for them. It might not be sufficient for someone else, right?
absolutely. I'm looking forward to it coming out, and we never know who might turn up this weekend on UFO Twitter. Mm. Anyway, moving swiftly on. I'm talking about media. I've been in public relations most of my adult life for my sins. And touching on the fact these films, there's documentaries, there's other documentaries that we're all hearing about at the moment. Do you think media outlets should be more responsible in the messaging and how they're reporting? I had a call from an unnamed British red top, and they were doing a story on I've been abducted by aliens and now I'm having an alien baby. And would I like to comment on sex with aliens? And any of my friends that know me in this space know that is a subject that I would just scream about. It's not my bag. And I had this reporter who I've known for 20 years. And I was like, are you really asking me this question? Seriously. And this reporter was dead ass serious. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to comment. Of course I'm not. But
Yeah,
you're going to run a story here. And where's the responsibility? Like, do you think there should be more, like, it like irks me. So, you know, there needs to be more responsibility in how this is put out there, right? Because presumably that's going
absolutely.
to
Yeah.
really, that takes away credibility for the work that everyone's doing. But that would freak me out, right?
Yeah, and it also dilutes and devalues what is very real here, and it's sort of, I met this guy, and I can't tell you who he is. It's not a big reveal, but I can't tell you who he is. But he was involved in. He had a small town newspaper in Arizona, not in New Mexico, and this was 50 years ago. And he said that the pressure to get stories out there that would have a large readership, which is not new news, right? It still occurs today, even more so with social media. um
Clicks.
yeah, exactly. There's real pressure there, which is why it's so important for journalists to follow the ethical code of conduct, which I actually posted on my X account a while back, or I was engaged in a discussion about it with. I was actually trying to get, I forget who, to sort of follow it more closely, because I do think it's important. But anyway, so this guy in Arizona, and we talked about Roswell, and he said, okay, the newspaper jumped to reveal that story. They really jumped to do that. That is more their agenda. And but did it change because the government was going in there quickly to sort of hide the truth? Possibly. Or is it, oh, they kind of got ahead of themselves and were thinking about readership, and their paper was about to fold, and they needed a really good story, and let's not vet it like we usually do. And we don't fully know, right? Um, I don't know where I stand with Roswell, and I hope that people are open to being okay with me not knowing kind of where I stand yet on some of these issues. I would say maybe the majority of people do believe that occurred. I'm not there yet. I haven't seen the data yet to conclude that definitely kind of involved the phenomenon versus a military exercise. But
It's all
but
a
yeah, there's a
journey,
big
Dan.
responsibility. What's
It's
that?
all it's all a journey. I think any of us
Yeah.
going through this topic and experience, my views have altered in the past couple of years. I was a very big champion of, um, C5, highest human initiated contact experiences, and I had a lot of media interest in the UK around that because I spoke about it openly. The Daily Mail covered it, yada yada, and then I had an experience in my home that 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 scared me somewhat. Well, more than scared me, it freaked me out, and I didn't know what to do with it. So my views changed, and I think as we're presented with more data and more things that we can onboard, we're just learning and working our way through it. That
Yeah.
takes me quite nicely to another point, and you mentioned at the beginning of the space that you dealt with sort of, was it sort of adolescent type anxiety as well in your career?
Hmm.
Is that right?
Hmm.
I We've had, well, so, all of us have had UFOs, aliens, all within, TV programs, cartoons. You'll remember Space Raiders in the UK, little alien crisps. It's the
Hmm.
topic is around us. And now with the younger ones having social media more than I did, I'm nearly 40. I didn't have social media growing up. Do you think there's something around education and how kids are coming in to discover this topic? And I, I'll sort of come into it why. I was at a conference last year with I forget his name, PC Roy. Oh, I'll put it. I'll share his details. And we were talking about a program that was in UK schools where these abduction experience, alien crash landings had happened in the playground, and the playground, it was like this big theatrical opportunity. The children learned about it. It was all a bit woo. My child was absolutely terrified, like scared beyond belief. And my
Hmm.
son has like this mad anxiety around when I talk about the phenomena and I talk about what's happened to me. And I don't really discuss it in front of him. But my question is, to someone who deals with adolescent anxieties, what do we do in those circumstances? How do we kind of put the right way into our younger people that doesn't give them
Hmm.
loads of anxiety? What would be
Yeah,
your opinion
yeah.
on that?
Oh no, I'm pleased you asked that because that, is what I do. It means a lot to me. And the clients I work with, and I've got kids too. So I will tell you. So I got two lovely daughters, and one of them, the younger one is so interested. She's like, Dad, can we go and look at the stars? Maybe we'll see an orb. Maybe loves it. And my other one gets a little scared, and I can tell. So I don't think there's a universal way that we should handle it. But and just like anything, we adapt what we share and when based on a child's response, right? Based on what they can handle, what's right for them. I don't think, I don't think we're quite at a place in our understanding to have some curriculum that should be in the schools about this. Not at all. I think it's our curriculum should be grounded in really in science as much as possible. Now there are subjects that are less grounded in science, and that's important too, from art and creativity and spirituality. And but I do think we should be more cautious because we don't really know what the intent is. Now I think it's pretty logical to say that if there was some malintent, it would have happened by now after these thousands of years. And yes, are there some bad experiences? Are they, you know, not the norm, and they're just unfortunate sort of I don't know, circumstances, or I don't know that either, right? But it kind of, so in regards, so it's sort of individualizing it based on what that person can handle, and being, yeah, really careful with what you share, and what a child sees too, and what they're exposed to. And one thing it's slightly off topic, but it will come back to it, is that, in regards to when you're talking to, let's say, a client, whether a teenager or an adult or a child, and it's less, what the content of what they're saying, but how it's impacting their life. That's really what defines someone having an issue or needing help, or is the impact. In my field, we call it, the social, emotional, sort of academic impact, or how it's impacting their functioning. But if they've had an experience and it's not impacting them, whatever it might be, they had a major encounter with the phenomenon orb in their house that did XYZ, but they're fine. There's less need to sort of have sort of an intervention to kind of support them through it, or try to interpret it, because we define sort of a problem by basically its impact. So that allows me, at least, to focus on, okay, what is true for the individual is true, basically, and their emotion they have is real, because it's their emotion, it's what they saw, how they feel. I have to lead with that, and I have to stay with that, and that's how you would join with them, foster an attunement and emotional connection in a radically authentic way, which will create an environment where they're going to share more, and that sense of uncertainty and fear can turn into trust and faith, and a way to integrate their experience in with normal life.
I'm really touched by that, Dan. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. No,
A bit of a side
it's not like
comment.
me not to be lost for a word or two, but yeah, you got me a little bit there. What role do you envisage for mental health professionals and practitioner in the future of all this? What's the role of people like yourselves? What do you think that is?
I think the role will continue with as it. Hopefully it improves. So I hope that the mental health field and practitioners across all spectrums, from whether it's school psychology, counseling, occupational therapy, psychology, psychiatry, that there's a greater openness, empathy, sensitivity to different ways of thinking, different experiences, things that we can't necessarily hear or see. And I mean, if you look at all the things that we're learning and discovering about, the subatomic world, and how quantum particles and act and react and are visible and not visible. I mean, there's so much we don't know, and the I think it could just be really limiting for the self and others to just stay in that sort of closed world, where we just think, kind of, this is the truth because this is what we've always been known. We've got to be open to other perspectives, and just because we don't see it or have an experience doesn't mean it's not real. So really respecting individual differences, individual experiences, and leading really with your heart just as much as you do with your mind. I think that's the sort of the main mission. But I'd love to see what you think.
We talk about this. You may or may not know that I'm kind of involved with unhidden.org here in the UK. And their work is really important to me as an experiencer, because when I had my most startling experience, you know, I'm aware of the phenomena. I'm aware of my my journey. I speak to lots of different people from all slices and spaces and places, and I was really kind of freaked out. And even someone with my kind of education in this environment and having access to have conversations in lots of different places with lots of different people. I genuinely didn't know what to do with that information and what happened to me. And I thought, you know, if I'm someone who's connected and, to lots of different people and I have an environment to talk about this, and this has really freaked me out, like, it's a bit of a mind bend, isn't it, really? I just really advocate for kinds of conversations around the whole thing, not regardless of to be negative,
Hmm.
but whatever's happened to you as an experiencer, that there's places to have those kinds of conversations. And unfortunately, those places, there's not many of them. I'm aware of a couple of organizations, Jay King runs the Experience Network, Unhidden are doing some things. There's various little tight groups here, there, and everywhere, but there's not one place in which people can go and get the support and the help they need. And
Hmm.
that's the role I hope mental health professionals, that maybe stewards of a new way. But even people
Mm.
in, colleagues of yours would probably wouldn't even entertain this. And how do you deal with that then, Dan? If you're into this topic, otherwise you
Yeah.
wouldn't be here. How do you reconcile that with your professional colleagues? Do you talk about it openly?
I've had one conversation recently, actually, just because they did find me on X and realized that, hey, you used to market your program and mental health more, and now you're veering into a totally different topic. But I think it's not only, yeah, I mean, if you think about space, just even the experience of a space, typically a space is empty. And we are in a space with people and it's a community. And we learn through communicating with others, we learn from others. Any issue, positive, negative, is typically the outcomes or experience of it is not going to be the same in isolation. It can delve in, it can evolve into maybe negative rumination. If you had an experience and you have no outlet, that thing that was okay, you were kind of adaptively dealing with it, can quickly turn into a maladaptive situation because you've got no one to speak to. So I really encourage, finding, a community to share your experience and to connect with, because that's absolutely critical. I mean, there was a world, and I'm speaking a lot about mental health because that's my background, but where you couldn't talk about substance abuse addiction or panic attacks or eating disorders, or you had nowhere to go. So people were self-medicating any issue they had, and so it's so important, the community. Now, one thing I will say is that you also want to be a little wary of any community that kind of I don't know, doesn't include some people because they don't believe this at this level. Any belief system can, there's fringe elements, right, that can evolve into sort of a cult like, have a cult like feel or develop into a cult. And you want to be really wary of that. How much is it defined by sort of group identity and rule following, and who can join and who can't, and the extent to which that group criticizes other people and follows more of a black and white rigid kind of view of the world and the topic, that you want to be wary of. Because if you're passionate about this and you really want to connect with us, it can be very easy to get sucked into. I know some very bright, smart, intelligent, grounded people that they were part of a group and they were developing self-awareness, meditation, and suddenly a year later they are trapped in a cult and they don't even know it.
You know what?
So,
This is
yeah.
so serendipitous. I literally had a conversation about 45 minutes before we jumped on here. Um, in the UK, about 2 years ago, there was an emerging UFO cult. It's the only word I can give them. And they were a group of people that were, and I'm not going to name it because I don't want to shine attention to it, because I find them not good people and they're still active. And they were actively seeking out groups of experiencers who were congregating on social medias, so Facebook groups predominantly. And have you had an experience? We can help you. We are mental health trained. We know what you've been through. Come be with us. We can heal you. And people, because the UK, we don't, we're not very emotive. We don't like to have these big public displays of help me. We're dealing with things, as we mentioned earlier. And tens of people were being welcomed into the midst of this group, and it got that cult like that they were not even allowed to communicate with each other anymore about their
Hmm.
experiences, and they were only allowed to communicate with the head dude. And I
Yep.
was invited along to one of these things, and I find myself in odd spaces all the time because I'm curious. And I remember being in this environment like, these people are having psychological trauma, and they were culted. I don't even know that's a right word. So there is that worry out there that unfortunately, when people don't have spaces and places to go and services, they end up in these environments. And yeah, that's a big worry.
Yeah,
And
and
unfortunately, we hear
what
of
you want
it.
to look out for, and you actually just brought up a couple of warning signs, right? Is there a one, or typically it's one charismatic leader, right? Um, and they are purporting to, usually it's like helping with trauma, and that there's only information or a process or a way that only they know, and they can take you through to get to that other side, that place of healing. And then obviously as it evolves, they're encouraging, if they're encouraging open communication and connect with your families, question, your doubts, think about those doubts. This is not the only way. That's all healthy, right? But if it's the opposite of that, then be wary. So it's really differentiating, community support and acceptance versus, a community that's basically evolving from space to a tunnel, to a cave.
Absolutely. Yeah, I forgot. It was just so interesting that I'd had that conversation earlier today. I'm going to shift gears, and if it's not something you want to touch on professionally, I totally get that. Hypnosis, it's used sometimes to help with, like, European experiences, to maybe recover lost memories. You know, I don't know. I don't know where I've done regression, and I've got my own views on it. Do you see that as a beneficial or maybe a risky method for uncovering any repossessed, like its house, repressed experiences, and maybe
Hmm.
what ethical considerations should be taken into account? But if you're not comfortable answering that, because I know sometimes doctors aren't, but
Hmm.
I was going to throw it out there. Hypnosis,
Yeah,
what's your view on it?
yeah. So I'm not an expert at hypnosis, but I've had significant training. I've used hypnosis. I've gone through the training of the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis, and that's hypnosis not for entertainment, which is mostly people's first experience. Right, they're at high school or college, and some hypnotist entertainer comes and gets people to bark like a dog or whatever. Do some, and those people are in a trance, and that state. So the hypnotic trance is a very real state that can be induced, and some people are more susceptible to it. I think it's around 75% are, um, don't quote me on that percentage, but around that, are more susceptible to being hypnotized. It's easier to be hypnotized if there is a larger group. It's easy to be hypnotized if you know that you're the person that's doing the hypnosis is a hypnotist. So there's that sort of expectation. It can be very helpful, and there's scientific evidence to support its use in the reduction of anxiety, the cessation of smoking, the treatment of enuresis, which is bedwetting among children. It can be very useful, and it is used by dentists and surgeons. Um, Not commonly, but for people that can't go under and general anesthesia. So there's medical literature to support the use of hypnosis to as a analgesic. I can never say that word, as a pain reducer. And also,
Analgesic. See, I can't say it either.
all right, there you go. But yeah, through hypnosis, I can certainly make someone not feel kind of anything in their arm, or you can put them in an altered state, but it's a very highly suggestible state and it can be misused. You're inducing that sort of a trance like kind of place and state that's sort of kind of in between awake and sleep, and where someone is suggestible, and in that state of suggestibility, someone can be recounting something that they think is real. Now, it's either can be kind of induced or planted by the hypnotist intentionally or not, or it can be something that you dreamt about 4 nights ago or 2 weeks ago that you weren't aware of. But you think you're actually like pulling out some memory from the past. So in that regard, I'm very skeptical about it. It's just my opinion. I would really encourage to do the research, do your own sort of, look into the literature about the use of hypnosis for regression and all that. But I'm not a proponent personally, based on the research that I've seen. I think that its use to get more details about an encounter are not usually accurate. It's a shady ground that I'm such in the business of protecting people and their identity and their safety, and to know that someone could be inducing a very vulnerable state, it does just make me nervous. So, are there good people out there doing it, and is there some truth to it? Possibly, but I have not found the evidence for it.
I
And
respect that,
also,
John.
hypnosis has been used, I hate to say, by a lot of cult leaders and neurolinguistic programming
Mm,
to control people. I mean, a great example of that is Nixium, a cult out of Albany. Um,
yes. Wow.
they used that initially. They were using it for quite honorable things like treating Tourette's, and then it worked extremely effectively. And then they got all these very credible, well-known people involved, and then it became the tunnel to the cave kind of situation where you're giving over money and you're all living together and all that.
They were the
So
ones that were getting
yeah,
branded, right?
yeah, hmm
Yeah,
yeah. It's taking
scary.
away your from individual identity to group identity, and an us and them, and you can see some concerning things. Doesn't mean it's cultish, but I would watch out for someone who is overly critical of someone else. So if someone's like, all their content or a lot of their content is criticizing someone, and maybe because they're a debunker, or because they're a full out believer, or you know uh, I'm more wary of that. That doesn't make me feel like they're grounded in their own sense of who they are and what they believe. And so, yeah, you can learn a lot about someone else and their integrity, and based on how they treat others.
Yeah, that was quite powerful.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's actually quite simplistic. I mean, of course, yeah, you can, but if you go on it, I mean, there's some people that really. I'll give you an example. I'm sorry, I just feel like, okay, Mick West is a debunker, I would say. He defines himself somewhat. He'll say skeptic, but he is.
Hmm.
And is his bias more like he's going to go to what he knows, which is things related to optical illusion, and he's good at figuring out because he's a video game programmer and he's got a lot of cameras and he can figure that out and a lot of things out, right? But he doesn't obviously have the answers. Is he a little closed-minded? Yes. Is he looking to debunk it? Yes. But he's not a bad person. He's not destroying people. He's asking questions, actually quite respectfully. Um, Sometimes it might come across like not so, but it's really not intentional. But there are others that, for clicks, let's say, and I'm not going to mention any names, but tabloid type posts that really are denigrating people and bringing people down. And I don't think that that's good or necessary, and tells me a lot about, kind of who they are.
Absolutely. And I grapple sometimes with speaking up and not speaking up and how things can be perceived because, especially on environments like certainly this community on UFOX, you know, everyone has a lot to say, and sometimes it's different coins of the phenomena and different sides of their experience. And one thing that is I've talked about, and there's um, a friend or two in this space that we've talked about it a lot. And I'm asking you because of your sort of education. To me, and I'm not educated nowhere near the way you are, and but as someone who's neurodiverse, I'm autistic, I have ADHD, I also have a crazy little thing that I can never pronounce, synesthesia, so I hear in colours,
Hmm.
which makes for good fun at raves in my younger days. But I'm finding when I meet a lot of experiences, or those who've had exceptional experiences happen to them, a lot of people seem to be neurodiverse, and there seems to be a link to me. And I find that really curious. Is that something you've come across?
So I more so I think more people are becoming aware of that because maybe in part, right, neurodiversity is a new term that's a little easier to say than autistic or high functioning autism. I'm like kind of neurodiverse versus neurotypical. It's cool to be diverse, right? So I think that that might be a part of it. What I have absolutely noticed is that, and I've been on spaces, and I really like the experience of dropping into spaces across the spectrum of belief and listening and learning from others because I've learned I knew this going in before, but to be honest, degrees, I got 4 degrees. Doesn't really matter. Like I've learned more from people that have 0 degrees, and the level of empathy, sensitivity, emotional awareness, a lot of empaths, right? It's really a beautiful thing to see that in this community and across spaces, and that people deeply care about other people. I mean, I've got so many examples of people and spaces all just really caring about each other, and not leading them down. Now real skeptics say, well, they're leading them down some dark path of crazy beliefs, or no, they are offering a radically accepting and genuine and authentic space to share who you are, your experience in a non-judgmental environment. How can a therapist not love that? And I certainly do. So I'm so grateful for these
Mm,
spaces and for what you do, and for I've seen a lot of names and people on here that I've seen in other spaces, and they have the courage to share
yeah,
what they share. But yeah, going back to your question, yeah, I think there could be a correlation there, and that is something that's interesting to look at. But I would say the main correlational factor is uh, a higher degree of maybe sensitivity, emotional awareness, um, and maybe some trauma. I am saying that some history of kind of trauma, but because you've got to be kind of maybe more open-minded, and some mental health issues or something traumatic has you may be more open-minded because of that experience or the recovery from something like that. But it's a great question that I really fully can't answer.
thank you. We have got quite a few people in the space, and I'm wondering if we have any questions for any listeners. This is Dr. Dan's first space with us, so if there is any hands or anyone who wants to come up, I can see a couple of requests. So, Dan, are you okay to answer a question or two?
I would love that.
Okay, so request if you'd like to come up, and I will. I can't even get my words out because you've just made give me the warm and fuzzies on that last point. Here we go. Things are connecting. BC, you had a question? BC? Dun dun dun. There's people coming up. Oh, it's going to be busy. How long have we got you for, Dan?
I'm I sorry, I am good until like 3:30.
My time?
Your time, yeah, that's yeah, right. Another 12 hours. No, 5 hours.
That's fine. Fringe? Candace, would you like to ask Dan a
you, Holly.
question?
Thank you, Holly. Thank you so much, Dr. Dan. Dr. Dan, this is no pressure whatsoever, and I'm not sure how you feel about it being a professional. I'm not sure if I've been missing it or if you might be willing to hold spaces for experiencers in the very non-judgmental way you say.
Friend, you're rubber banding a little bit. We didn't get that full. Say that again.
Oh no, how about now,
Yeah,
Holly?
that's a bit
I
better.
think I think I heard it, but and correct me if I'm wrong. That would I be open to hosting a space to listen to sort of experience in a non-judgmental kind of way and forum kind of thing?
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Dr. Dan. Just, your point of view is very professional, very balanced, in my opinion. And sometimes experience would be phenomenal. If you would consider it if it's possible.
I certainly would, and I may think about having a co-host. I think that just to balance things out, to have some accountability, because I certainly don't. The opportunity to be a facilitator is wonderful because we all have information and knowledge, and I'd love to create that safe space. So yes.
I love that. Dot 55, your hands up.
Hi, thanks for letting me up to speak. Oh, my hand went up again. Why did it do that? Okay. And it just did it again. Never mind about that. Dr. Villiers, I'm excited that you came into this space. I believe you're in my general local area. And I'm wondering if there are any groups that you facilitate here that deal with the anxiety around the experiencers' uh, experiences, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No, I don't. And I mean, the last sort of group work I've done has been in more of the traditional realm, right? So people coming for an anxiety support group or a social phobia group, or but not specifically for the phenomena. I would almost feel not experienced enough, but maybe that's just my own issues I got to work through. But I think maybe a good starting place a space on X, right, where I'm co-facilitating, that space as a entry point.
Well, let me know because I'll certainly be there and I'd be very interested in attending and pushing out spaces like that for people like us.
That's wonderful to hear.
VC, did you have a question? Mm-mm-mm. Okay, seemingly enough. I'll keep it open for some more questions as we get through, but I don't want to take up too much of Dan's time. Um, we really have covered quite some ground for your first Twitter X space, Dan. We've done we've
Yeah,
certainly traversed right through. So is there
yeah.
anything, if you had one sort of message out there for experiencers that are listening, people that might re-listen to this space in the future, as a professional doing what you do you have a message for them, like how they can get through their experience, how they can deal with this? Because so many of us go one way or the other way. I just wondered if you had any comments or words for those listening.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I am really passionate about is certainly, and I think we're all interested in, right, in hearing people's experiences and seeing video, and maybe this is my proclivity as a therapist, counselor, is that I do believe in eyewitness testimony more than maybe a skeptic would, right? Now, yes, I love hard science. I like radar data, and I want data from multiple sources. But I do think eyewitness testimony is extremely important as well. And so that's one thing I want to say. The other is to really avoid black and white thinking as best as one can. I think there's a lot of communication that I've just been hearing that that is aware of the nuances of human behavior and motivation and avoids sort of rigid categorization. I hear, well, either someone's, a trusted source of information, or they're a government disinformation agent, or someone's being labeled as credible or a fraud. I just feel that these extremes create like a false dichotomy often, actually. And and we see this, right? There's believers and then there's debunkers, and I want to, I like a space that revolves around the idea that people are, not heroes and villains or grifters and saviors, but we all have this shared experience, the shared interest, and if not a shared experience, a shared interest in learning about the experiences of others, so that we can all come to a truth that is palatable, manageable for us, that elicits emotional insight and even hope and faith and some joy and excitement for the future and our place in on this world and the world after this, right? Or whatever happens after. Um,
Mm.
we all share this. We all have a fear of death, whether you talk about it or not. The one thing that we all share is that that's going to happen to everyone, right? And I do have certain theories related to that, but I just speak of them as theories, and I think it's good to speak of things as theories versus facts, and phrase things as questions more as statements as best you can. So I do believe, for example, no, I'm questioning and theorizing that consciousness is something that makes sense, that it as a part of evolution, that it goes on, that it continues, because from a sort of a survival of the fittest, and it sort of doesn't make sense from an evolutionary perspective that consciousness dies when we die, is my point. And that is something that I'm questioning and exploring, but it doesn't mean that it is. And I hear a lot of, this is what this is, and this is this is an uncredible person, this is a villain, he works for the government. It's just, I think the world is a lot more nuanced than that, and that there are psychological experiences too. So let's say, someone writes a book and parts of it might be embellished, or they're on a documentary and it was edited in a certain way that something they said sounded like one thing when it was another, or he made a mistake and he said 1997 when he meant 2007, and these things happen. I'm sorry, my kid just ran in. So, to be forgiving and realizing that we're imperfect people that say,
We're human.
yeah, we're human. We talk about like if and everything's online, right? And everything's recorded. We're all going to make mistakes, and we're passionate about it too. So sometimes we let that kind of lead us too much as well, and we all want to be grounded as well. So just realizing that we're human, and to be forgiving and not immediately label people or theories in one way. Just see the nuance of life, and see life in less black and white terms, and especially this topic in less black and white terms, because none of us really know the answer.
I love that. So beautifully put. I think we're going to have one last question. We've got Science Bob up here. Bob, I see you. Do you have a question for Dan? And then I think we'll probably let Dan get back to his beautiful children and carry on with his day. Bob, over to you.
Yeah, I don't have anything long-winded. It's not really a question. I wanted to comment and make an offer. Dan, I'm a scientist, applied mathematician, engineer, started two engineering companies, but I'm also an experiencer and lived with a person who's been an experiencer all her life. So I want, and I really appreciate your approach. As a Bayesian probabilist, I never delete data. So experiencer observations is data. So let me volunteer, since I'm in all these communities, published author and hard sciences, etc., to volunteer to co-host your space.
Well, yeah, it would be a real privilege, and yeah, I like the way you think, and I thank you for that offer. I'd love to, yeah, discuss that offline. I think that would be great.
Oh, you guys. Wow. I think this is a natural pause to what I hope will not be the last space we do together, Dan. I believe everything happens for a reason. I'm one of those rule girls, and I stumbled across you recently, and I was like, this dude's fascinating, and I'm glad that we've been able to share this space, and I'm glad we've been able to talk privately, and I'm glad that we've shared this space with lots of great people in the room. So thank you for your time. We'll do
Oh,
it
thank you
again.
so much, Holly. This has been great.
My absolute pleasure. So, guys, girls, and beings, and all that's in
Know what's in
between,
between.
we have a series of spaces happening this evening. We have got Mello hosting Chris Bledsoe later on tonight. I think it's like silly o'clock my time, but I'll make sure that's tweeted out. UFO Twitter Week is happening all week. There's so many spaces happening that cover a wide range of this phenomena, and please get involved, ask some questions, support the community, support each other. And you know what? We just need to be a bit kinder and ask more kinds of questions of each other. And yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in. Our first space of the week. Shout out to Astro, as always. Take care, everyone. Look after each other and be kind. That's us done. Good night.